welcome to the first ever Power Girls event. On today's panel, I'm so happy to be joined by owner of Home Sweet Ballpark, Megan Elias, digital social media creator, Julie Mulholland, digital social media content creator, Chrissy Wobble, Texas Tech baseball reporter Ali Sadar, and sports reporter and host Ali Bunshil, and part of the Sixers social media team, Ali Closen. We're going to talk about representation of women in sports. So I just want to thank you all so much for joining, and I'm so happy and honored to be talking with you guys today.
Thanks for having us.
Of course. So my first question to ask you guys is what made you guys want to work in sports in the first place? Like, what made you fall in love with sports and made you guys start in the sports world? And we'll start with Megan.
So, kind of a weird story. Well, actually, it's not really weird, but basically, growing up, I remember always watching Padres games with my grandpa on TV. So it's kind of one of my lasting memories. And so when he passed, that was kind of one thing that left. So I was like, okay, I want to do something with baseball. I like hockey, but baseball is my main sport. And so I was baseball manager in high school. And then once college came around, they started having college nights at Petco Park. And I was there for every single one of them. And the ballpark just kind of became my home. All the ballpark staff and stuff were amazing. And so right away I switched my major to communication and media with a minor in digital and social media. So I want to work something within baseball media, but then I also started Home Sweet Ballpark as a way to make some extra money to pay my tuition. And that's just kind of grown over the last 2 years. So it's complete opposite side of what I want to do within baseball, but it's something to still just connect me with the sport and show my love for the game.
It's amazing. I love that. I learned so much about what you do. It's so amazing. I see always Carly Baldwin, everyone posting about. I'm like, this girl, I need to get this girl on. I need to talk to her and learn more. But what's going to Chrissy? I know you post TikToks for a long time and a long time Angels fan and stuff. What made you kind of start into this career path with sports and stuff? Because I know you're such big Angels fan and love making TikToks about sports and stuff. And so I just kind of want to know how you guys started out and stuff. What made you want about baseball?
Well, growing up, my brother played baseball, and then I played softball my entire life. And we always went to Angel games because they were so close. I live 20 minutes from the stadium. But what really, really got me into it is throughout high school, I had a lot of knee injuries. I've had 4 knee surgeries throughout my high school experience. And that caused a lot of depression. And the thing that I felt brought me joy was watching baseball. So I ended up resonating with the team and just always looking for it for joy. And then the TikToks just started because I was bored in quarantine in 2020.
Yeah, for us, for quarantine, obviously once the pandemic started, baseball and the whole sports world shut down. And once everything shut down in baseball, I was like, what am I going to do in my life? I lived that my whole world was going to fall apart because of baseball. Because of course, baseball and sports is a huge part of my life, our lives. And obviously for me, I love baseball and I love sports, and I just love anything about the sports world to the point where I'm like, how am I going to live without sports and stuff? So and then we'll go to Ali. What made, you said you work for you do all these social media things and stuff. What made you want to go into the sports world? We go with Ali Salazar.
Yeah, so basically how I got started with it, I've always been involved in sports my whole life. I've always played, it didn't really matter what sport, whatever. And then in middle school, I joined the broadcasting team, and really it was only because some of my friends were also doing it. So we were oh, we could have a class together for sure. And it was actually really fun. And one time, one of my broadcast teachers was oh, do you want to go film the basketball game and make a little promo video? And I was sure. So I really it started from there, and then kind of forgot about it, but I continued doing just regular broadcasting stuff throughout high school. And then once I got to college, I got the opportunity to do a bunch of reporting for the baseball team and also for the College of Media and Communications here at Tech. So once I started doing that, I just got super invested into baseball. And if I'm being completely honest, I honestly forgot baseball was a sport. So once I started doing it, I started meeting like a bunch of different people like behind the scenes and like the guys. So like a bunch of people started like teaching me things and I started learning. Like I have this like binder with like just a bunch of different notes. So now I'm just like, it's taken over my life and it's honestly probably like the biggest blessing ever. So
That's so amazing. So I want to jump to the other alley as well. Like you work for the Sixers and stuff. So like what like were you like a basketball fan before like you become a Sixers fan? Like were you a sports fan before like you basically started working for the Sixers?
Yeah, so I grew up a Philly sports fan. I live like 2 hours from the city. My parents were big Philly sports fans, so I kind of just grew up with it. And like I had a younger brother who always did sports, and I was just always wanting to go to his games. And I don't know, I feel like all the other sisters would be like playing or something, and I was always the one to be watching. Like I just loved watching sports.
Mm.
And then for me, I didn't even play that many. I was a competitive cheerleader my whole life, which is kind of funny. So I always, got those silly questions from guys when I said like, oh, I actually like to watch football games or whatever it would be. And then going into college, I had no intentions of working in sports. I didn't even really think about it or know it would be a thing for me. Just because growing up, I grew up in like the middle of nowhere. So I didn't really know that was even a possibility for me. And then obviously, um, it just kind of happened, honestly. Like, I don't even like people ask, and I'm just kind of like, they're always like, how did you get all these like internships? And I'm like, I literally just kind of applied. Like, I don't have some like secret trick or anything, but for the Sixers, um, yeah, I grew up a fan. I definitely feel like basketball is a sport that I don't know the most. So I'm excited to kind of learn more about it from working in it and, doing fun stuff with social. Yeah, really exciting stuff. And yeah, I
That's
don't know.
amazing. Like I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania as well. Like I live outside 2 hours of PA, like Philadelphia as well. And my family was big is big Philly sports fans. They're crazy. Like we
Yeah.
love going to opening day every single year. Like that was like our family's like tradition. And I grew up going to my brother's games as well. My older brother plays baseball, and the only thing that I did every single day or most of my time was at the baseball field. That was like where people like I say like where people when people ask me they're like, where you at or whatever, what are you doing? I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm at a baseball field doing something with my brother. Like that was always me at the baseball field. So I basically that was like my second home and stuff. So I like it's like and now I think about it, like most of my childhood was actually like at the baseball field, basically doing nothing besides watching my brother play.
Yeah,
So
I
it
get
was like
that.
yeah, so I want to go to Jules. Like you are a big Cincinnati, Cleveland sports fan and stuff, and like you got to throw out the first pitch and all of those things. Like, did you
That's
always be like a like Ohio sports fan and stuff? Because I know like I see you go always at games and stuff. Like, did you always like Ohio sports and stuff?
It's complicated. It's interesting. So I initially started as a Reds fan when I was younger because my dad, he's obsessed with baseball. That's when I fell in love with baseball. Plus, I played softball. So it was pretty easy for me to get the hang of it. And he was a Reds fan. So I was like, okay. So I went to Reds games when I was younger. And then I got more into basketball. So I started watching the Cavs mainly because they're 3 hours away. And it was the closest team we had. Unfortunately, in the middle of nowhere. I also grew up in a small town with 2,000 people in it. So very fun. And then I slowly got into football, but it started with the Browns, and they decided to sign a certain quarterback. And now I'm kind of like, well, the Bengals aren't too bad, and they don't have a problematic quarterback. So that's kind of where I'm at right now, is just hoping they both have fun. And I don't like Ohio State. That's the weird thing, is I actually don't like Ohio State. So, ew. That's really what I have to say about that.
Like you don't need to like all the teams. Like that's how I am with sports. I'm like, oh, why did we sign this player? I literally hate my team. That's literally how I feel every single day. Like that's literally how I feel.
Yeah, I just moved to Cincinnati 2 months ago, and I've been to more Reds games than I should have been for my own mental health wallet. They're not very good, but it's very fun to go to. So I've been to a few games, but not as many as I'd like to, because it's now a 4-hour drive to Cleveland, which is not fun because there's nothing to look at. It's just corn.
Yeah, I grew up like me and Allie, like we were like in Pennsylvania. Like Pennsylvania is full of like farms, it's all country, like all Pennsylvania. Not necessarily in like Philadelphia area, but like more necessarily in the middle of the state, like sort of like Pittsburgh State College around that area. It's like all like country and all of that stuff. And now I'm like, I wish like, oh, like nothing's interesting about PA besides the sports, I feel like.
That's so high up. It's so boring here. There's like Cedar Point, and then you have like Northwest Ohio, which is where I'm from and where I'm at right now. There's nothing there. There's nothing.
Yeah, that's all PA is. Like it's like all dead around here besides like not like all the sports teams.
Yeah, literally that's how it is.
Yeah, so I want to jump to Alaya. Like you're a sports reporter and a host. Like, did you always dream of doing that? Like, did you always like think like, oh my God, I'm gonna be a sports reporter or something? Or did you think you're gonna do something else like in life?
Yeah, when like going through middle school and high school, I was always sports reporting. Like I even started an anonymous Twitter account that would like cover my high school sports. But I didn't really realize like the career opportunities within sports and sports reporting. I thought I was so good at business, at advertising and marketing and everything that I just thought naturally that's what I had to do. And then my parents were like, no, like, I think you should pursue something you actually love. And I've been very adamant since day one of college that the traditional sports reporting roles are kind of going out and a new wave is coming in. And that new wave is, people having their own platform and, even teams and leagues, they have their own internal media company. So you don't just have to be a broadcast journalist on TV, like local news. So ever since like I saw that new wave coming in, like I realized like the amount of opportunities you can have. And with me personally, like I didn't want to wait around for it. I started my own page, Sports with Aaliyah, and kind of took off from there. So it was like one of those things where I never knew this is what exactly I wanted to do, but everything I did in life kind of led me to this.
That's amazing. Like I feel like some people like that I talked to from my organization and from my podcast is like all like some people really don't expect to go into thing like in the sports world, even though they're sports fans. Like for me personally, I grew up watching sports, but I never became a fan of like baseball and all those sports until 2018. I never expected myself to like it. I was like, oh, it's just something for me to do this so I won't be bored. Like I never kind of expect myself to be like, oh, this like little sports freak, always watching games and like making my whole personality on sports, which is true and stuff. And like my whole personality is on sports. And I literally sometimes yell at the TV during a game, which every sports fan does. And people think I'm like nuts. And like it's just something you really don't expect yourself doing in the next couple of years. Like did you kind of like how did you guys first start out in the sports industry? Like where did you kind of start out at? Like do you have any internships and stuff like that you guys started out? And we'll start with Chrissy. Yeah.
My Wi-Fi just cut out. I have no idea what you just said.
Yeah, sorry about that. Like how did you kind of first start out in sports? Did you like kind of like do something to kind of get more influence and get better at your craft in sports? Or just kind of do it kind of for fun or just kind of build like your craft and everything?
I did it. I definitely just started it off for fun on TikTok. I like honestly just bored one day, and I think it started off as I saw a video from Carly, who I love Carly to death. I saw it from her and I was like, oh, like this is so cool. She makes baseball talks. Like I know a lot about baseball. It's my entire personality trait. The Angels logo is painted on my bedroom wall. I think I can do something with this. And then from there, like obviously like didn't take off too much, but like it definitely has become like a fun thing to do when I'm like bored, and like it's brought me some of my best friends. So I'm so grateful for like that boredom that I had in quarantine 2 years ago.
Like, did you kind of expect to make TikToks? Like, did you expect like to like enjoy it that much, or you kind of thought like, oh, this is probably just gonna happen for a couple of months while we're in quarantine?
I definitely did not expect to enjoy it as much as I did, especially because starting off on TikTok was so hard because it was all the guys. Oh, like you don't know anything about sports. I got a lot of comments about getting out of my brother's room, and I'm like, it's not my brother's room. It's definitely my bedroom with all the baseball stuff. So I definitely like at first I didn't even really enjoy it because of all the hate. Like once like I continuously like showed that like I do know what I'm doing and I do sports. The hate when I kind of gained respect from like the baseball boys community, and that's where the joy really came from. Is like all the people sending me their own stories on Instagram and like, oh, like this is why I love baseball, and like, oh, this is my favorite player, and like blah blah blah. All that stuff is like definitely the reason why I love it. Is everyone like reaching out with their own stories.
Exactly. That's really the reason why like I love what I do as well. Is like you're really influencing and inspiring young girls to really to like choose this career path. And that's the reason why I do this in the first place, is to really impact so many young girls and women. Because like obviously that, like Chrissy said, like people like boys specifically always come out post comments on like their Instagram, TikTok, or any social media page and be like, oh, a girl can't like sports. They probably just like them for the guys, like, or they like just go there just to, you know, like do their own thing. Like they probably just don't like sports. Like girls do not like sports. And obviously I'm like, girls can like sports. Like I literally, like some people will ask me, be like, oh, can you at least name 5 players? I'm like, of course I can. Like if I didn't like sports that much, that wouldn't be my whole personality. And basically be what I would do in my free time is watching sports. And obviously like girls obviously do get discriminated and like say like, oh, you can't do that in every sector of society, specifically not specifically in sports or entertainment, and basically in all forms in today's society. So like what would you guys say, like what, like how would, like when you guys say like what was the hardest part for you about being like a woman in sports? And like as like basically like being a woman in sports is hard, and of course being a woman it's very hard to basically start out in any career path and stuff. So like I like want to get your opinion, so we'll start with Alaya.
Okay, so I raised my hand because I want to talk about something that like doesn't really get talked about a whole lot, and that's the internal struggles of being a woman in sports, like within a company, because like obviously like there's internet trolls literally everywhere, and like just don't pay attention to them or like block them, and like that's like easier to deal with than like actually trying to like move up in a career, which I think needs to be talked about more. Like when I first got my start in sports, I worked for the campus newspaper, and that was probably the most toxic environment like I've literally ever been in. And I think like the hardest thing is like proving like your worth like to people that actually matter, that promote hire and everything within organizations in sports. And I think like that needs to be addressed. And so that's definitely like the hardest part. Like, yeah, the internet trolls suck, but I think it's important to navigate like, you know, internally with different organizations, being inclusive. And I think like the right organization will find you, and you just need to look for that and don't tolerate, you know, discrimination in the workforce. Like quit that job if they aren't respectful of you as a woman in sports. So I think that just needs to be talked about a little bit more.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree, because like obviously people don't really see that women are being discriminated and all these things. Like, people think like, oh my God, women are not being discriminated. Like we don't tell women what to do and everything, but like you do. And I remember receiving a comment on my post. I forget, I don't know if it was like about sports or something, but I remember receiving a comment of like, oh, this is not true. I'm like thinking to myself like, you don't really know. Like if you actually got the data and the facts and get the woman and girl stories in the industry in sports and get their experience, then you'll be blown away by how they feel. Because obviously everyone has different opinions and people got different experience. Like not everyone has the same same like things that happen to them. So obviously you should learn, like it's always good, okay to learn. And like you don't know until at least you look into the data and before you say anything. And so I would jump into Jules and like you see what she has to say.
Hey, I honestly I don't know how to put this hand down, so it might just be up there the whole time. It's so weird. But I was raising my hand for this because something else I've noticed personally, outside of just the trolls, is people just assuming, like, over sexualizing women in sports, whether you're just a fan or like actually working in sports as well. There's really weird comments made towards me. Somebody else mentioned it. It was just assuming, oh, you're only doing this to get guys' attentions, but just like other things where people saying like, oh, how do you get these tickets? Like, you have to be, somebody on the team or what. I'm like, no, I just I have good friends that work with the teams and they offer, hey, do you want tickets for this game? I'm never like, hey, give me tickets, because I know how annoying that is. But it's just like just weird comments and just that kind of stuff. I don't know. It's something I still have to get used to. And I'm sure people deal with weird, not necessarily mean comments, but like just weird.
Yeah, I get the same comments as well. People be like, how do you go to so many games? Like they'll be like, oh, you're always at like, volleyball games for Penn State, or you're always going to baseball games, you're always going to see the Dodgers, Phillies, and going to all these things. I'm like, because like it's something me and my family enjoy doing. That's something that me and my family enjoy doing. It makes me specifically happy. If it makes you happy, then don't let anyone judge you for it, and don't let it take you to you. That's just something that I'm trying to learn as well. Because like if people don't see that it makes you happy, then they need to learn that like they must have liked something too that people probably get annoyed of, but they don't say anything. So
Yeah.
they just like, I feel like if your sports is what makes you happy and going to games every single day, like if I went to games every day, I could. Like I really would go to games every single day if I could. Like it's literally was something that makes like us basically, what makes us happy and the reason why we love sports in the first place. And so I want to jump to Megan.
Okay, hello. So a couple things to touch on here. Going to sports or going to games every day. I'm a full season ticket holder for Padres. Last night was game 51 on the season for me.
Oh wow.
And let me tell you, there are so many times where I'll run into regulars and be like, oh, so you're only here to get Instagram photos? I'm like, please tell me when the last time I posted an Instagram photo at the ballpark was, which might have been like a month ago. But even then, yeah, this has kind of become my personality trait, but it's like I go there for the game. I am there with the scorebook. Yeah, I treat it like a social event sometimes. It is networking, making friends with the people that work there, the front office and stuff, especially if you want to work in this industry. It's all about who you know and the connections you have. And so my best friend is actually the marketing manager for the Padres, which super awesome story about this. She was the one that helped me get my first internship last summer in Amarillo, Texas, which Ale, I was only 2 hours above you last summer because we were super close with tech and stuff. So I understand the Texas struggle. But she was the one that I knew she worked for a minor league team that I wanted to work for. I saw an opportunity, was like, hey, this job is available. Should I apply? And she was like, yes, go ahead and apply. I'll put a good word in for you. Week later, I had an interview. I was hired. A month after that, I was moving from California to Texas. It's about who you know, and don't let people talk crap to you saying you're only there to stare at the guys. You're only there for Instagram photos. It's just a social event. It's a little bit of everything, Look at the guys, it's a little bit of a bonus. We can all admit that a little bit, but that's not the sole purpose of being there. So it's ridiculous, especially on Twitter and stuff. I don't know if you guys are familiar with people on Padres Twitter. That's kind of how I got my start in sports a little bit, was talking with people on Twitter about the Padres, especially when we weren't doing so good. I would have some hot takes in there and they'd be like, who is this girl? Why is she speaking out? What does she know? And so after I kept putting my hot takes and stuff out there, I started gaining that respect and they're like, okay, this girl is serious. So I haven't really, experienced that much hate on Twitter or that side of being discriminated as a woman in sports as much as I've known others have. But it's just consistently putting yourself out there, showing your worth, showing your knowledge. And if they can't handle it, then that's their fault or that's their loss. you can only do so much, especially when you do see others. Like, I have really bad imposter syndrome a lot of the time with being a woman in sports, because I'll see like Aaliyah has been doing awesome. Like, I love seeing all the great work that she's been doing with sports with Leah and stuff. And sometimes I'm like, wow, I'm not up to that level yet. But again, it's not really a race. Everyone's doing their own spots. There's jobs for everyone in sports. There's so many different behind the scenes things. Everyone thinks that women in sports is all about broadcasting and just being the face in front of a camera. And granted, there's a lot of people that do that. That's kind of something I want to do. But at the same time, though, my internship in Amarillo was working in merchandising. I never thought I'd work in merchandising, but being a business owner of a baseball apparel brand, I decided to give it a shot. And so that kind of helped get my foot in the door. I know I'm like a little all over the place because I know the original questions kind of started about internships and then discrimination. So I'm like touching a little bit on everything. So if anyone wants to chime in, feel free to chime in too. But it's about taking the chances, networking, and doing whatever you can to see what you like within sports. There's so many different career paths in it that people don't realize. They need people in finance, they need game day staff, people in merchandising. There's all these different little spots within it, sports, that makes the organizations run, that it's worth it to always be checking up on teamwork every week, see what the new listings are. That's the only way to get your foot in, is networking on LinkedIn, checking teamwork, and putting in the work to see what's available. Try a little bit of everything. For me, I did merchandising, and that's not the exact career path I want to do, but at least I tried it. I learned from it. I learned working game day, and I was able to apply some of those skills to my own business. But now I'm like, okay, cool. Let's, divot to a different perspective. So lately, I've been bringing my camera to games because I'm not working in sports right now since I'm still finishing up my degree, but I'm bringing my camera to games, and I've been trying my hand at sports photography now. So it's trying a little bit of everything and seeing what works for you.
Exactly.
So anyone can go from there. I'll shut up with my little rant.
I feel like I can kind of touch on that, just because the first question I've always been asked is when, like, I work in sports, or it's like, oh, do you want to be like a broadcaster? And that's just like not at all what I do. And I feel like I've had plenty of internships at this point, and none of them have been, every single internship I had has been different. So I've seen so many different sides of sports that just I never knew existed. Like for my minor league internship, I was a game day staff member. I did literally everything under the sun that game day staff does. And then I went into ticket sales for the MLB with the Phillies. And then I went into corporate partnerships for the Flyers. And then now I'm in social media, which is where I knew I wanted to end up. And I feel like one thing that I was worried about, I know me specifically, I was like, okay, like I don't have that social media experience. Like, I don't know how I'm going to get a job, but like just knowing the different sides of sports, like one of the main things in my interviews with the Sixers was like, oh, you worked in corporate partnerships. We work so close with corporate partnerships for sponsored content. Like that's a huge part of it. And they were really intrigued that I knew so much. And even now going into meetings every week, it's so helpful that I like the corporate partner team, their team understands like, oh, okay, she knows like partners are annoying or whatnot. Like it's just like a really good, well-rounded thing to have in sports, is just knowing ticket sales, especially. It's basically what runs sports at this point is ticket sales. It's a business at the end of the day. So knowing anything you can with that is super helpful. So I guess I would always recommend that, if it's not what you want to do exactly, like still take that experience. It's how I got to where I am, and I never thought I would be here in a million years. So I think that's important. And then going off of like just the hardest part of being a woman in sports, like I was going to say, kind of going what like Aaliyah was saying, is like the internet is hard and it does suck sometimes. I've experienced it myself, but like taking that into the real life when, you're going into work, and I've gotten a lot better with it with time, but I remember like my first couple internships, I was like, I felt like I had to prove myself, even to like co-interns. I'd have these guys question me and I'm like, why? But so like just having to prove yourself. And then a job that I interviewed for before I had the Sixers job actually didn't hire me because I was a girl, and I would have had to be, I was a younger girl who would have, been involved in near players, and that was a problem. And then come to now where I am, and I'm on a social media team of one of 3 women that are all younger, and I love it. And it's been, I was shocked when I found out that the other 2 social people were women. I was like so happy. I remember talking about it in our interview. I was like, that's like amazing. And she was like, yeah. And I like kind of told her what just happened to me. And she was like, that's ridiculous. And it sucks, but it's something that I always tell myself, like, everything does happen for a reason. And clearly it worked out great for me. I'm super excited to be where I am. And yeah, just kind of, I don't know. Yeah, I feel like the main piece for me would just be like, don't like let it get to you. I feel like, because that's something we all struggle with. And especially when it comes into real life and off the internet, that was the hard part for me. Like, I can deal with internet trolls commenting on my videos or stupid guys, but like when you go into the office and it's like actually happening in person, like that's what like really hit hard for me.
Yeah, like that's how like I am as well. Like obviously we're all young women trying to make a living or just trying to do what we love out of sports and make and try to have fun with our lives. Because obviously if we didn't like what we were doing, we wouldn't be basically wouldn't do it. And obviously I was just talking to my friend about this yesterday, and she think like me and her think like, oh, that like guys have come up to me and be like, oh, like are you like famous and stuff? Are you actually famous? I'm like, well, like I wouldn't consider myself famous. Like you guys can believe whatever you want. I just like I'm the person that's like, okay, well, I have a podcast and stuff. I do some things in sports or whatever, do things around entertainment and sports. I wouldn't consider myself famous. Yes, I have connections. I know a lot of people, but I'm not considered famous. And every time someone asks me I'm famous, it's always a guy, and they're always sarcastic about it. Like they'll be like, "Why? How is she famous for?" Because I'm probably because they think like, "Oh, why this girl's a woman? How is she famous?" And like that's something that bothers me. I'm like, who cares if they're a woman? Like there's so many women like you guys are literally craving away for other women in sports that are coming behind us. And that's something that like that's why we need more female role models in this sports world and people in general, because obviously people really don't see themselves or feel represented or whatever. And 2 years ago, like I never expected to be doing what I was doing. I was just a like 14-year-old 13-year-old girl doing her own thing, watching sports. Like that was like my whole personality. Now I think about it, I'm like, wow, like this is like my life now. And I'm sure it's that for everyone. Be like, oh my God, like I'm literally living out my dream that I always wanted to do. And so I do like out of like your guys' opinions, I do think representation is in sports is getting better or worse. And we'll catch back with Ali Salazar in everything.
Yeah, so really, I think that it's definitely gotten better. I feel like back in the day, it used to be a lot more difficult for women to kind of like, make a way and be a part of like a broadcasting crew or even just have a certain role within any organization or team or network or whatever you might be interested in. But I feel like it's definitely gotten a lot better. There's still people that are still going to question your knowledge and what you know, how you got your job, why you're at games, just a bunch of stuff like that. But at the end of the day, with me, how I kind of take it as is, okay, well, maybe they're just hating because they're jealous or, so that's how I always kind of see it. I'm like, okay, I mean, or maybe they're dealing with other stuff. That's why they're kind of questioning everything. And like with me, whenever I first started making like TikTok videos and stuff, I thought I was kind of embarrassed about like my whole broadcasting stuff. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do a little day in my life. Like this is actually kind of interesting. And a bunch of people started like liking them. And even like some of like my guy friends, they were like, whoa, like you're actually like doing this, whatever. And I was like, yeah, like it's actually fun. So, I mean, it's cool because I feel like now a lot of guys and even um, other girls, they'll just like talk to me about it. Like, oh, like how's like sports reporting and sports broadcast and all this stuff. So I feel like it's definitely gotten better, but obviously there's still, I'd probably say there's older men that are going to be the harsh critiques and like they're going to be critiquing you and kind of judging you and stuff like that. So I feel like that's where most of like the hate and criticism kind of comes from, but I feel like that's farther up in like the industry and stuff. And even in college sports, like now, with me, I just kind of had to like make my own way in email and stuff like that, because my producer was like, well, you could try emailing the athletics director to talk about maybe doing like another sport, whatever. Like this year I'm going to be also doing football, but it's not always easy. They kind of question every single thing you do and stuff like that, and sometimes they want to see videos of you doing stuff. But now so many people kind of know my name and like my face around campus now, because of sports broadcasting. So I feel like it's definitely gotten better, but it can definitely still improve, and I think it is.
Exactly. And so I would like to jump to Chrissy and like whoever wants to jump in. And like do you like if anyone wants to like jump in or whatever, like in your opinion, how can people make change for women in media or specifically in sports? Like how do you think people can make a change for women that just want to be in a sports world or just starting up but don't know where to go?
I want to jump in and say real quick that it says that there's less than a minute left on this feed.
Yeah.
So it might quit out on us. But then to answer that real quick in less than a minute, just go for it. Look at jobs on Teamwork, see what there is, or even then, like how Chrissy and Jules have started, they made TikToks, they made themselves out there. Same thing with sports with Aaliyah. Put yourself out there. It doesn't hurt to get your camera out, start recording, make content you love. And that's the way to get yourself out there. Once you start that, the possibilities are limitless. Then you can try to see what you like to do and, bounce around, try a little bit of everything like I was saying earlier. And then once you land something that you love, you're never going to work a day in your life because it's just going to be a fun thing to do every day. So I'm still jumping around, seeing what I like. I like making a little bit of everything, and I haven't landed where I want to be yet, but I'm having fun in the process of making my own path and getting to where I want to be. So it's all about starting and making that first step, and that's how you can do it.
I think Megan said it best. It's really just all about like how you start and like just pushing through like all the internet trolls and like making those connections. The connections I've made through TikTok have been the absolute best and have gotten me so much further than like just like holding back and like not reaching out to people. It's definitely a scary thing reaching out to like random people on the internet, but I mean, like I reached out to Megan and we met up at a game and it was so much fun. It was the best time ever. And like so I would definitely say like reach out to people, make connections, because that's how you're going to get farthest.